California was like this legendary paradise. This was the folk rock special.
Chasta here for 107.7 The Bone and Soundwaves TV. I'm so excited to have in the studio with me today Jakob Dylan, the star of, and Andrew Slater, the director of Echo in the Canyon, a new film out that I'm so excited about. Let's get into it, guys. This is super exciting.
Hey there.
And I won't pretend to not totally be geeking out right now. Kind of just go down this path for a second.
Go.
So, I mean, I'm a kid of the 90s. The Wallflowers was a huge band, part of the fabric of my teenage years, my angst teenage years. There's a lot of people in this building that are freaking out that Jakob Dylan's in my studio right now.
These guys are keeping it together pretty well. You're doing awesome.
And of course, rock and roll royalty with your dad being Bob Dylan and all. And then you guys getting to talk with Tom Petty for the last time on camera. That blows my mind. And that is huge for here at The Bone because we play classic rock and Tom Petty is a god in our world. So can we start there? Tom Petty is a big part of this film. This film is about the 60s scene in Laurel Canyon and the music that was there and changed the world from then on. But let's talk first about Tom Petty's involvement in this. How did you guys come to be in this film and how did you get Tom Petty involved?
Why don't you begin with how the film originates?
Well, the film originates from Jakob and I sitting around my living room looking for the next thing that we're going to do in life.
Okay.
And this movie comes on called Model Shop, which was a movie shot in 1967 by Jakob Dylan. And it showed us L.A. at a time when it was completely innocent, completely devoid of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, people on their cell phones not knowing where they're going. And so it sent us back on like a little exploration to the music of that time and to kind of just find out what really started it all in California. And what we found were these songs, and we're not filmmakers, so we started with the music.
Right.
And it also coincided with the Byrds' 50th anniversary of their first record and the electrification of folk music. And that's where it started. And you know, Tom Petty, that music is a huge influence on him.
Yeah.
And I'll let Jakob tell you from there.
Tom does feature in the film. And he was very generous to come down and sit with us for a few hours. But there's a lot of people, of course, that are in the film. And, I know Tom seems to be getting a bit more of attention than other people just because, unfortunately, of his passing.
Right.
But, he was important to us because he was, as Andy said, a real student of that music and influenced him greatly. As we all saw through his career, he covered the Byrds.
Yeah.
He even produced Roger McGuinn at some point. He played that Rickenbacker a lot in his career. And that's where it comes from. And as we all know, the music that we like when we're 14, 15, 16 stays with us forever. We always seem to like it. You never, 30 years later, think, well, I had terrible taste when I was 14. It's still...
It's nostalgic to you. It brings back all the feels. Yeah.
But it's right. It's right when you really need it at that point. And that's just true. You don't really need music as much as you get older. So it's important that we had Tom speak because we speak to a lot of people who were there, and we speak to people like they're more my age that have researched and gone back over time. But Tom was there right in the thick of it and influenced him greatly.
Yeah, you talked to so many of, huge influences in that era. I mean, so going through the bands that lived in the same neighborhood in Laurel Canyon together, which just thinking about this scene is, I wish I would have been a fly on the wall. The Byrds, the Mamas and the Papas. I mean, you could go on. And they were within walking distance to one another. And I love that you guys point out they didn't have the access to email stuff to each other. Hey, listen to this riff. They would literally walk on over, well, not even knock on the door, open the door and say, hey, check this out. In the day that we live now, it's so different with social media and our access to technology. Can we ever get that sort of vibe back, do you think, that community essence that existed in the 60s in Laurel Canyon? Because it really was so different than it is now.
I mean, I think a virtual community exists. You put something up on Instagram and people like it and people look at it and they look at your stories and there's an exchange of ideas. But, the thing about that period and that beginning of Laurel Canyon is that there was a sense of community and there wasn't a detached connection. There was a real physical connection. And the film really explores how groups came to California when the Byrds had a hit. They had multiple singers and multiple songwriters in the bands, just like the Beatles. And I think it was before there was big business and they realized they could make a lot of money, so people weren't as proprietary about things. They would just go across the street and say, as Graham Nash says in the film, hey, check this out. And they were sharing ideas within their groups, and they were sharing ideas with each other. And the echo of their creativity, goes across to England, where it changes the course of the Beatles. And that really is the bedrock for everything in rock music.
I love the part where you guys were talking about Pet Sounds and how it was a huge inspiration to Sgt. Pepper's. And it brought up a question in my mind. Where is the line between inspiration and, I don't want to use the word ripoff, for the lack of better word, ripoff. I mean, Eric Clapton talked about being, quote unquote, inspired by other songs and doing his own take on it. Where's that line?
Well, the film is really as much about the echo as it is about the canyon. It's the echo of people's ideas and the creativity. When Roger McGuinn sees Hard Day's Night and he sees George Harrison with the Rickenbacker, he takes a guitar and he electrifies folk music.
Right.
And he electrifies Pete Seeger's Bells of Rhymney and Turn, Turn, Turn. And when George Harrison hears that, he writes If I Needed Someone.
Right.
And that goes on Rubber Soul. And when Brian Wilson hears Rubber Soul, he writes Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
And when Paul McCartney hears the acetate that Lou Adler from the Mamas and Papas producer brings to England, and he hears that, they go off and do Sgt. Pepper. So, that whole connection is just so strong. And like I said, it has to be the bedrock of everything that we love in pop music, in rock music from that point forward.
It's really a domino effect, in the inspiration.
It is, and the thing you're talking about Eric Clapton in the film, we didn't know a lot of this, so we find out that Stephen Stills wrote the song Questions based on a song of Judy Collins's called Since You've Asked, and Eric Clapton hears Questions, and he writes his first song, Let It Rain. So,
which is very eerily similar.
Yeah, well, it is, but so the line between plagiarism and inspiration, is probably for a lawyer to determine. But thank God in that time, people weren't really focused on that. And, I'm sure you can dissect any chord progression and say that's the same. But really, the idea of a song and the melody and the chord progression, it takes all those components together to really create something that's a tracing paper version. And none of this is that.
It's very hard to be original anymore, too, I think, because so much has happened, over decades and decades in music. It's hard to come out and be truly, truly original. I mean, bands, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Greta Van Fleet. They get a lot of crap for being a quote-unquote Zeppelin ripoff. Now, I love them. I'm one of the biggest Zeppelin fans, too. So my thought is, if you're going to be inspired by a group of artists, why not choose some of the best, and do it in your own way?
True.
As an artist, what do you think?
You should take a couple of your influences and try to put them together so you have something unique. That's where you get
that.
that's why, that's where the good stuff is. The Ramones are the groups they love and comic books. You put those together, you get the Ramones. You get unique things.
That's true.
Just being influenced by only one thing, you're just going to sound like that one thing. And it ends up sounding like a talent show or a play or something. So
or
a
cover
tribute
band.
act or a cover band.
Yeah.
And, you have to, and then you wear the clothes too. It just looks...
That
not
may
for
be where
everybody.
they're killing themselves because they look so much like that era. It's almost like they're dressing up in costumes. I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah. I encourage all rock bands to get out and do it. So I'm glad people are talking about that specific group, but personally, I'm not sure that I'm understanding it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. How did you guys decide who you were going to choose to talk to in the film? Because you have some awesome interviews. I mean, you guys talked to such legends.
They were all organic, the legends you speak of, as well as the younger people that are, well, I should say people my age. We'll say younger than.
Who are also legends, by the way.
Yeah, it was all organic, and they're all people that we are associated with or know who had a connection to Laurel Canyon. And there wasn't, I can't think of anybody that we did with that. Maybe Brian Wilson was somebody I had known. I don't think you had. That's it.
You had not met, you mean?
No, hadn't. And he was kind enough to come down. But everybody else was somebody. It wasn't like we had to put a list together, like a dream wish list. It just kind of unfolded, and one of us would say, "I know how to reach him," and et cetera. So it was very organic.
And the songs that we covered are the 10 poles of the story, because we were examining that period, the beginning period from 65 to 67, when people hear the Byrds have a hit. They're like supposed to be the American Beatles. They have the mushroom haircuts and the little velvet collars and it was the suits. And, people come out. And so for the songs, we do the Mamas and Papas Go Where You Want to Go. And that was their first single in 65. But it was also a defining moment in the relationship between John Phillips and Michelle Phillips because they had very different ideas of the boundaries of marriage.
And she was very open. She just went for it.
She tells it like it is.
She does.
And that's a good thing. But, and then Going Back was a song that was really the fracturing moment for David Crosby and Roger McGuinn, because David Crosby thought his song about a menage a trois should go on the radio in 1967, and he couldn't be convinced that wasn't really going to happen at that time.
Yeah.
And again, also Expecting to Fly is the moment where, in the Buffalo Springfield, Stephen Stills says that's when he knew Neil was going to be forging his own path. So those are the songs, and then when you look at those songs, you want to talk to the people who wrote them, and you want to find those stories, and I think that defined who we talked to and what we found out.
There was one sort of obvious choice that I was surprised was not in the film. His name is Bob. Was he ever talked to about doing this? He was referenced in the film. Crosby talked about him to you briefly.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with that. And
I knew we forgot something.
I know, right? Dang it! Why didn't we call him?
The short answer just doesn't really pertain. It just doesn't really have. Since we're talking about groups and we're talking about them influencing each other and trading ideas.
Yeah.
They're just there's no association with Laurel Canyon really.
So don't force it.
Anything.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, Jim Morrison, you could say, why is Jim Morrison? He lived in Laurel Canyon. He's not there. He was a guy who was in a band, and it was sort of about him. We were exploring the thing of they all want to be like the Beatles.
Yeah.
And they're going to come together, and they have multiple songwriters and multiple singers. And you find out why that doesn't last in the film. You find out that Michelle's, extramarital stuff created tension, and you find out David's behavior created tension, and you find out, as Stephen says, that even though they had a wealth of material, they were really in divergent directions. And so that's what the film's about.
Yeah. I also love that you weave in and out of the film the concert that you put on with these current artists, Fiona Apple and Norah Jones. And I mean, it's really cool how you have this, dynamic between the old stuff and the new stuff, and the, new being done, or the old being done by the new. How did you guys decide that was what you wanted to do, the concert and the soundtrack and the whole nine, in that way?
Rock filmmaking in the last, 50 years has been about 3 or 4 things. It's about, historical document of a time. It's about a concert film. It's about some cinema verite of something happening in the studio. And what we wanted to do is to try to take all of those elements together and try to put them in a film. So you literally see in the middle of a song, we're recording at Western Studios where the Mamas and Papas recorded.
Yeah.
And then you're in the middle of the song at the concert doing the song. Then you're back in the studio, and then the author of the song is sitting there listening to it. So for us, it was something challenging, but it was something new because we just didn't want to make a historical document of Laurel Canyon, and we didn't want to make a concert film. So we wanted to try to do it all. And hopefully it gives you the feeling of community and kindness that was happening at that time, and yet something new also, because the songs are interpreted as duets.
I just also have to compliment you on the vibe of it, because you really get this very special innocence about Los Angeles. It is not the first thing you think of, when you think about LA. And I used to live in Laurel Canyon. And I remember when I lived there was all this folklore about that area. The neighbors would tell stories and they would talk, because a lot of people have lived there for, generations and long time. And they would tell me the story. And I want to know if you guys have heard this. I was waiting for this in the film, and you never said anything, so I assume it's not true. There's a story there that there was a day on a Sunday when all the windows in Laurel Canyon were opened, and they all dropped the needle on a Beatles song at the same time, and it reverberated through the canyon. Do you know anything about that? Is there any truth to that?
I would like to know how they organized that back in the day.
That was my next question.
When, they didn't even have a cell phone.
No atomic clocks are happening, right?
Exactly, okay.
Somebody screws up, and 30 seconds later they put it down, the whole thing. Start over. Yeah,
in Laurel Canyon, getting everybody to know when 12 noon was in 1967 would be difficult because they were all stoned.
That's true. Yeah, that's fair enough. So you don't think that?
I've never heard that.
You haven't?
Me either. No.
I was told it a million times. Living in the canyon, there's a lot of conversation, and you drive by the country store every single day, and you're always seeing somebody. oftentimes I would see like Tommy Lee there, which
It's a different era.
it's very cool, but very different.
Different aesthetic.
But it's very cool, and you capture the vibe. I mean, I don't want to ruin anything for anyone because I want everyone to go see this film. But in the very beginning, the way you edited, Jacob driving down and the Sunset Strip now as opposed to when it was before, that was very cool.
Well, the film is based on or inspired by that film Model Shop by Jacques Demy.
Which I have to go see now.
That was the thing that really set it off for us. And so, the echo of people's creativity is also involved in the film, but also the echo of time.
Yeah.
Because when you see it then and you see it now and you see the influence of that music on the music of Beck or the music of Jacob or the music of Fiona, I mean, it's clearly in their records. And, there's a moment, I don't want to ruin the film, but there's a moment where Neil Young picks up his guitar and it's 1966, and as his guitar comes down, there he is in present day. So
I love that.
It's all in there.
It's such a beautiful film. You
Oh,
guys
thank
really
you so
have
much.
done such a great job with it. So I end every interview with every rock star I've ever talked to with the same question. And I don't know that I've ever been more excited to ask it to someone because I think your answers are going to be especially good. So it's from the film Almost Famous. You guys probably know that movie. And the question in the last frame is ask, what do you love about music? Seems simple, but it's kind of heavy.
I think it seems simple.
I think it seems simple. I have a simple
me.
answer, but I'm not the rock star. He's the rock star.
Which
No,
is
You're a rock
today-
star in your own
today
right.
you
Come
are.
on.
Today
Yeah,
you
yeah,
are.
come on. Come
well,
on.
I
I'm
beg to
dying to know.
differ, but I'll answer your question.
Yes.
What do I love about music?
Mm-hmm.
I love that it expresses the things I feel that I cannot say. It takes me to places that I have been and yet to go, and inspires me to do things that I didn't know would be possible.
That's why I
Love
asked that
that.
question. It's beautiful. Jacob, your turn.
Say the question again.
What do you love about music?
People they come and go in your life, but music is always there, and you expect people to come and go.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's any other senses that we have that is that recalls a feeling. You hear a song that you last heard in 1982, you can still sing along, and it's just stuck in there.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything else in your life. It's of course you can expound on that and say how great it is, et cetera, and all that. But it does has this very unique place in your life.
It's true.
That it won't go anywhere. And today, you kind of expect most things are going to go somewhere. It's always there.
That's one of the things I'm jealous of because I'm not a musician. I wish I were, but I guess there's always time, right? But I have jealousy that art form, and movies for that matter, lasts forever. Like long after you're gone, that legacy lasts forever. And, generations from now.
If you're
it'll be
good at it.
Well, I love Jacob because he's a realist. No, you're right. If you're good at it. But, it's a beautiful thing. Both.
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you to say,
Please.
I'm wrong about that. Today, with the internet, if it's not good, it's still going to be forever.
Everything
So,
lasts forever,
yeah.
unfortunately, on the internet
True.
today.
Yep.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for taking the time.
you.
This has been a real pleasure for
Thank
me.
you.
So, Echo in the Canyon in theaters now. If people are looking for more information, echointhecanyon.com, is that the best place for them to go?
It's the best place to go.
Okay, awesome. Andrew Slater, director, Jakob Dylan, star of Echo in the Canyon. Go see it now. You must. Thank you guys.
All right, thanks.